Today, I'm joined by Zak Hanshew, returning after a week off. We're going to have a look at some injury news, very recent injury news from this morning or this evening in the States, and how that looks for the next week of fantasy action. This is Fantasy Basketball International. This is Balls Deep. Got all my interest, mirrors they don't reflect all of the things that we do. Welcome to the Balls Deep podcast, part of the Fantasy Basketball International podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Fantrax. Fantrax is the number one fantasy sports platform on the planet. We use it for all of our leagues. It's very customizable. I think my favorite aspect of Fantrax is the treasurer feature that they have, so I don't have to worry about money when I'm running my leagues. But if you're in any of our leagues, you know that we've used it forever, and you can move your league over. If you are looking for a new experience, contact them, contact us. We'll get you sorted out. I'm going to bring Zak in. Zak, welcome back. Had some family stuff last week, but good to have you back. And we have aligned our wardrobe once again with Indiana merch.
Loving it, man. And this was not on purpose. This is just 2 shows in a row where we're simpatico, man.
That's right. I just thought I'd wear it. So mine's an Obi Toppin. Yours is a Halliburton, I'm assuming. Yep.
Oh yeah.
So a little bit to talk about. As I said, some injury news, which we were going to cover. We've had some more information about it in the last couple of hours, and that's LaMelo Ball. Not good. I saw the incident from the angles that they had. It was pretty limited, but to me, it actually didn't look that bad. I saw him go down, and it was sort of, it didn't look like he went over on it too far. It was sort of a bit innocuous, but he was obviously in some pain and he had to be carried off the court. And they've come out today and said that it's a serious ankle sprain. They haven't put a time frame on this, but straight away my mind goes to at least a month, given his ankle history. I think this is something like his 5th ankle sprain in the last year or 18 months or something. So it wouldn't surprise me if, the Hornets haven't looked good. And in a month, if they're tracking towards being a sort of a bottom 4-5 team in the East, there's no rush. Like, they're not going to bring him back. It could be 6 weeks. What are your initial thoughts here on the Ball injury?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. And when I saw the news, my gut reaction was, here we go again. Like you said, this isn't his first ankle injury. He played 36 games last season, and he kept re-injuring that ankle. That's what it was all season long. And here we are, 15 games into the season, and what do you know? It's the same thing. So this would be a lot different if this was knee or hand or wrist or, something different than ankle, but it's the same injury again. And I totally agree with you, man. Charlotte is already doesn't look like a team that's going to compete for a playoff spot. So there's no reason to rush this guy back. He's still very young. He looked amazing to start the season. And there's no way they're going to bring him back before he's good and ready.
No, it's disappointing. I was probably one of the highest on him this season. Happy to take him at pick 7, pick 8. And I think I ended up getting him in. I know I've got him in at least 1 league, potentially 2. And I'll move him to my IR spot for now. But the team I've got him in, the one I know that I've got him in, my team sucks anyway because I've had some other injuries. So I don't see myself really pushing for a championship in that league this year with him out. So I'll probably just end up keeping him in there and rolling him back out when he's fit. But is he someone that you need to hold on to if possible, or I don't know? The uncertainty is interesting. as I said, could be 4 weeks, could be 6, could be 8. Who knows? What would you be doing if you had him? Would you try and hold him? Would you try and trade him for anything?
I mean, you absolutely have to hold him if you have the IR spot. You have to hold him. I mean, he's a guy that's that's capable of putting up. I think his last 4 games before he got hurt, what was he averaging, like 35 points and 8 assists? I mean, something bananas, and like 5 or 6 triples. So I mean, he was just going off before that. So you have to hold him. But I think, like you said, it depends on your team situation. So if you're dead last and you're about to put LaMelo in IR, maybe you trade him to the first place team who has a little bit of wiggle room and see if you can maybe get some guys and try to compete for a little bit. But yeah, that's the only scenario where I'm trading him, unless somebody really gives me a great offer. Somebody offers me a top 50 guy, I'll bite on that for sure. But I just don't think that's what you're going to get in return for him.
No, and look, so moving to the Hornets as a whole, I guess, any fantasy like beneficiaries here? Are we adding anyone? For me, it's really just it's just a switch of Terry Rozier and LaMelo. Like, Rozier has been out, he comes in, takes those LaMelo minutes. So I think their rotation's basically going to look like what it has looked like the last couple of weeks. But with Rozier handling the ball a little bit more, his assist numbers are probably going to go up, but his percentages might come down like we saw last year. But yeah, anyone, I mean, Ish Smith, I suppose he's going to have a role, maybe some streaming value, but yeah, any significant names to go and grab or monitor?
I mean, if he's available, I would expect with LaMelo out, I would expect Rozier to shift over to point guard and Brandon Miller to stick back into the starting lineup.
Yeah.
So I think Brandon Miller is pretty widely rostered, but he's not somebody that's like 90%. So if he's available, he's a guy that you're going to have to get. He started the second half, of that game that LaMelo got injured. 20 points, 5 rebounds, an assist, a steal, a couple of triples. Over his last 5, he's been trending in the right direction. Kind of a rocky start, injured for a little bit, but he's been a top 80 guy here, over his last 5 games. So he's a guy that if he's available, you have to go out and add.
Yeah, and you're right. I think he's rostered in most leagues, but he is starting tonight. They've already released that starting lineup, so he is in there with Rozier, Hayward, Bridges, and Mark Williams. So no real surprises there. So the next guy I had on the list was another injury. Another guy that I had on multiple teams was Jalen Johnson. Now this one did look bad. So this one, when you were watching it, you went, "Oh, this could be multiple weeks." Yeah. I thought it was a pretty lazy defensive effort by Kyle Kuzma. I don't really think he didn't make. I mean, he sort of played at the ball, but he was never going to block that shot. I was a bit annoyed with this one as a manager with Jalen Johnson in a lot of teams, but he's out 6 weeks. They're sort of saying 4 to 6. I think it'll be 6. I'm holding him again where I can, but he's a little more, I suppose, expendable just because he doesn't have that upside of LaMelo Ball. Sadiq Bey, DeAndre Hunter, Bojan Bogdanovic, I think they're the guys that are going to benefit. What are you, in terms of prioritizing those guys, if they're all available, who would you have at the top of the list?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, Hunter, Bey, and Okongwu are the guys that I think are going to see the biggest bumps. It was interesting in that last game, Johnson's first missed game. Hunter played 40 minutes and Bey played 29. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Hunter had averaged 35 minutes a game over his last 3, even with Jalen healthy. 3 straight 20-point games. I know we've seen DeAndre Hunter kind of get hot and then cool off in spurts throughout his career, but no Jalen Johnson. Maybe getting additional minutes over Bey. I think he's the guy that I would be targeting the most here. Bey needs to be rostered as well. And then maybe we finally do see some Okongwu breakout. I know he hasn't been horrible this season, but he certainly hasn't been what we were hoping for. So this definitely frees up a little bit of playing time for him as well.
Yeah, you're right. Like Hunter's one of these guys who you pick up for a week and he averages 20 points and he's efficient, and then he goes off the boil and scores 8 points on 11 shots and that sort of thing. So he'll be up and down. But yeah, I mean, he was starting before, so he's going to get big minutes. Bay is starting tonight, as expected, starting again. So he's sort of a points and threes guy, can get some steals. He's a sneaky rebounder. He'll get you 6-7 rebounds. So there's some value there. And yeah, as you said, a Kongwu, I think we're all just waiting patiently like we have been for the last 2 years. But I mean, Capella's been decent. So there's no sort of indication that he's going to be starting or anything, but I think you just hold a Kongwu and see what happens over the next month, 2 months. But for me, if someone dropped a Kongwu in my league, I'd go and grab him straight away. So I think you have to frame it that way in your mind, and just hold on to him and ride the ups and downs a little bit. Now, I guess more positive news, some players that are returning or are on the cusp of a return. Jamal Murray is the first one I wanted to talk about. Coming back, so he's been out a month, I think. Reggie Jackson has obviously been the ad while he's been out, and coming off, I don't know, one of arguably the best game of his career last night against the Clippers. So I think Murray is possibly questionable or something for tomorrow. So he's very close. It's either the next game or the one after. Would you be just holding Reggie just to see? Because they may ease Murray back in slightly, so Reggie Jackson could have another week of value, or are you just going to preemptively cut bait and try and grab someone else?
I'll tell you what, man, it's a rule of thumb for me now. I never drop anybody. The first game that somebody's coming back from injury, I never drop that pickup. I always hold them for at least that one game, because I've been burned that way before. You drop a guy, and then whoever the starter was returns, and oh my gosh, he's back too early, and he re-aggravates that injury in that first game back. And all of a sudden you've dropped that very popular streamer. So no, you have to hold Reggie Jackson at least through this first game with Jamal Murray. Maybe he needs some ramp up time, and Reggie is still serviceable for a game or two, or maybe even up to a week. Maybe Jamal Murray doesn't come back as soon as expected. Maybe he suffers a setback in practice. You never know, man. And especially a guy coming off a 35-13 game. They're calling him the Clipper Killer after this one. You got to hold on to headband Reggie as long as you can, man.
And just to be clear, we're not adding DeAndre Jordan after last night's game, just in case anyone is venturing down that path, which we shouldn't be even considering. Look, it was pretty impressive to watch the two of them working together against their former team, and it was sort of a moment in the season I don't think we'll forget.
No, we saw the return of Lob City, man. He caught that one-handed jam, and I think he surprised the hell out of himself.
Yeah, he hasn't had to jump that much. I mean, I guess coming into the game, he was fresh because he hasn't played for 2 years, so he's had plenty of time to just get his body right. And look, great to see, but we're not adding him obviously unless Jokic is out long term. But I think he's questionable for tomorrow, so Jokic never misses more than a game or two. So this one, I guess, not as big in terms of the player, but Bojan Bogdanovic is getting closer as well. Although they said that a week ago, and he just keeps getting ruled out. But he'll be back at some point. Jaden Ivey has come back into the starting lineup in the last week and looked pretty good after that interesting start to the season. Who do you think they drop, or who do you think they shift to the bench when Bogdanovic comes back? Will it be Ivy, or I think it'll be one or two players. I think it'll be Ivy or Isaiah Stewart. Am I on track there? Do you think it'll be someone else, or?
No, it'll be one of those two. If I had to guess, it would be Ivy, who has just only recently started, starting for them again. He was off the bench for most of the season anyway, and he's looked really good since they put him back into the starting five. And I think if I had to guess, I think they paid Isaiah Stewart a little too much money in the offseason to keep him on the bench. I may be off track on that one, but I would say it would be Ivy. I certainly don't think it's going to be Austin Thompson. I think that was maybe the fear of some people early on, but I mean, that man is playing too well on both ends of the court. You're not going to bench him. But I don't see necessarily the big time upside for Uncle Bogey here. I mean, 21 points, 2.5 triples last season, decent percentages. And what else? I mean, he gives you nothing defensively. He gives you nothing with rebounds and assists. He's a points and threes guy, low turnovers, good percentages, and that's it. And he did this last season with, with Cade out, with no Austin Thompson. I just don't see how he improves on last season. And last season he was outside the top 125 anyway. So no real interest from me, regardless of his health.
No, I think I think he'll end up falling into that category of like your Norm Powell, Malik Beasley, Harrison Barnes to some degree. These guys, you can stream them in and get 15, 16 points for a couple of games, but they just don't do enough elsewhere to warrant being must roster. Unless in a certain build, I guess, if you're punting some of those peripheral stats, he might have a little bit of value. But so sort of going back to what you said there with not making that preemptive drop of a certain player. If we get news that Bogey is going to start and Ivy is going to come off the bench, I wouldn't drop Ivy. I've picked him up in a couple of leagues, managed to, and as I said, he's been really good. I think he could still have value off the bench. Do you think he still plays sort of 28, 30 minutes off the bench and it's just guys like Killian Hayes who just lose out?
Yeah, I think that may be what we see. And we never know with Bogdanovic when he comes back if it's going to be, how much of a ramp-up time it might be for him. He may end up being, the nominal starter, but that might equate to 14 or 15 minutes. And then you see somebody like Ivy playing 30 off the bench and still keeping up with what he's been doing. So, yeah, absolutely not dropping anybody until we see what happens.
Yeah, and I think the caveat here, but any time we talk about the Pistons, is that the caveat is that this is the Pistons, and I mean, they're playing Wiseman, they're playing so who knows what they're going to do? We're sort of saying what we think they might do, but that's not necessarily what they will do. So it is a wait and see. It's always a mystery with the Pistons to see what their rotations are going to look like. Now, this one, nothing major here. This is more because I've added someone as a result of this. But Draymond Green is going to be back from his little holiday. In his absence, Dario Saric has been really good. He's played good minutes. He's hitting his threes. He's getting some rebounds. I streamed him in, and I've just held on to him because he played so well. What do you think his role looks like? Well, like when the Warriors are healthy, when Draymond's back, do you think he can still scratch 12-team value, or is simply the playing time isn't going to be there?
I think he'll be close, right? So, I mean, like you said, Super Dario has been awesome with Draymond out, and he was close to 20 minutes a game, when Draymond was available. So I think, to me, and again, I'm not Steve Kerr, I'm not an NBA coach, I don't make these kind of decisions. But I mean, look at what's going on in Golden State, man. Nobody can hit a bucket. Nobody's spacing the floor. Curry is averaging 30 a night, and the next closest guy is Clay with 15. Like, this team is not scoring. This team is middle of the pack in defense. So you're going to have to, in my opinion, you need to kind of mix this lineup up and give some guys extra minutes. You don't need to be playing Wiggins 30 minutes. You don't need to be playing Clay 30 to 35 minutes. Give some extra minutes to guys like Saric, maybe Podziemski, maybe some of these other guys, and see what they can do with some different lineups and get some fresh looks. So I think Saric has been one of their more reliable players this season, and I would anticipate him playing 20-plus minutes.
I agree. I'm just going to hold him and see what happens. Yeah. And I mean, they've been very positive about his fit on this team and how important he's been as a connector and running the offense through him a bit. So I'm just going to hold him and see. And I think if he gets 22, 24 minutes, he could have some limited value. We'll see. He's been interesting. Now, a guy that is coming back that we haven't seen at all this season is Trey Murphy. I saw when I was over watching the Pelicans, I saw him warming up and he looked good. Like he looked ready to go in warm-ups, but obviously they're taking their time here, and it's been, when was I there? Well, it's been about a month since I was there. So he's had another month and he looked good when I was there. So I'm thinking he's very close there. He's doubtful for tomorrow's game. So he's probably not going to play tomorrow, but I think we would be looking at maybe the weekend or next week. And what do you think his role looks like? Because he was really good last year, but they had injuries to Zion. Brandon Ingram was in and out a lot. Herb Jones has been really good to start this season after dropping off a little bit last year. They've got Hawkins off the bench, who's been pretty impressive. So where do you think Murphy fits? Like, obviously they might ease him back in and play with the rotation a bit, but looking ahead a month, for instance, what do you think his role looks like when he's healthy?
Yeah, when he's healthy, this is going to be a tough one to call because, like you said, Herb has been playing great. The team is mostly healthy. McCollum looks like he's close to a return. He'll be at shoot around tomorrow, apparently. But I think after Murphy, I think they will probably take it slow with him and ramp him up. But I see no reason why he wouldn't play at least 25 minutes a night for this team, just because of how good he was last season. So I think he's a guy that he's a luxury stash. If you can pick him up, absolutely pick him up and hold him. But he's not going to play. He's not going to play 30 minutes a night on his first game back. I think it'll take a little bit of time, but we could see mid-20s to maybe 30 minutes a night. But man, there's a lot of mouths to feed on this team, man.
Yeah, it's a hard one to project. I drafted him in a couple of leagues with my last draft pick, and I've just stashed him in my IR. So the sooner he gets back, the better, because then I can move other guys into that injury spot. But something I said to Josh when I was on his show last week was how tall Trey Murphy is. Because I was watching him going, that's Trey Murphy, right? And I think he's about 6'10" or 6'11". So he is big. Like, even out there alongside Herb Jones, those guys, he towers over them. So whether he's growing or whether it's just, I've never really paid much attention, but I just thought that was really interesting here because a lot of players looked smaller in real life. He looked a lot bigger. So, I was a bit surprised by that. Two more guys that I've got, and then we can go over anyone that you're interested in. Walker Kessler came back late last week, I think, and I think he's looked good. I think we sort of talked about this with Dan. I don't know whether we covered it, but his elbow injury was suffered in the first game of the season, so he was obviously playing through that for those 3 weeks or whatever it was before he went down. But I think if you factor in that he was injured and then you look at his numbers, it lines up. He was injured. He didn't play well. People were getting frustrated, but he's played 2 games since he came back, 21 minutes and 26 minutes. He had an 11-11 double-double with a steal and 2 blocks, and then 14-8 with 2 blocks. Percentages are back up, shooting at least 50% in both games. Is he back? Because we were obviously pretty high on him coming into the season. Alex Reclean in particular, who we were talking about before we came on air, was very high on him. Are we good to go? Like, are we going to expect him to be what we thought he'd be with a double-double, 2-3 blocks, efficient, or have these 2 games been an illusion?
I would like to say that he's back. So obviously the 2 games that he's been back, it's been a pretty even split between him and Yurt-7. And Yurt-7 has put up 8.5 rebounds and 2 blocks compared to Kessler's 9.5 rebounds and 2 blocks. Minutes have been nearly identical for those 2 guys. But I mean, it's worth noting that, 27 minutes for Yurt-7 in Kessler's first game back, and then 22 in the last one, compared to Kessler's 26. So it looks like they're ramping Kessler up and he's about to reclaim that starting spot for good. but it's still concerning to me that this has been a minute split, in those two games. For another center to come out there and play over 20 minutes and give you some decent looks, that's concerning to me. So I think Kessler is trending up, and that's what we're looking at. But it's something that I'm paying close attention to here over the next week.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the Jazz have won both their last two games. So look, maybe they're rolling with what's winning them games at the moment because they haven't been very good to start the season. Lauri Markkanen announced today he's going to miss their next two games. So maybe they're just looking for because Yurtseven can spread the floor a little bit. He's not a reliable three-point shooter, but maybe it's for that reason, just because Markkanen has been injured. So we'll see. But yeah, look, I hope as well that Kessler is back. Final guy, speaking of disappointing players, Jordan Poole. Look, I think we thought he might have been back. He had a couple of good games, but then yesterday he was just dreadful. 10 points, I think 3 assists or something on 9 shots. And he was benched for Landry Shamet. When Landry Shamet's playing over you, there's issues. Is he going to work his way out of this? Like, what we thought he'd come in and he'd be the man in Washington and he'd be shooting the ball. Efficiency we knew was going to be an issue, but a lot of people were taking him inside the top 50, top 40, even in some spots. And I don't know. I have no idea what his rank is this season, but I have him on one team. And I mean, I'm not looking to trade him because you're not going to get anything back in a trade. He's too good to drop. The upside is there. The playing time is generally there. Although, I mean, if they're going to bench him, or they're not afraid to bench him, they were winning. It was a rare victory for them yesterday, so they might have just gone with Shamet because he was playing well. But what is he? He's outside the top 200 this season. Is there any hope?
I mean, you can only go up from here, I would hope. But I have lost hope with Jordan Poole. I mean, I talked to Noah about this earlier. I'm sure everybody and their grandmother has seen him, cross his guy up on the baseline, and instead of pulling up for an easy jumper, he stops and hesitates and then goes for some sort of goofy ass, finger roll shot and gets swatted into the bleachers. Yeah. And it's not just one goofy play. It kind of encapsulates what he's been doing for Washington this season, which is, does he care? I mean, is he out there just screwing around? I mean, because watching him, it doesn't look like he's taking anything seriously.
No, and look, I mean, that was a bit of a concern. There were sort of words coming out to the effect of him saying that he didn't even want to be traded to Washington. It wasn't part of his long-term plans, that sort of thing. And the way he's playing, you would say that, yes, he's just out there because he has to be. He's not really trying. He doesn't care. There's been multiple instances of vision where he doesn't appear to be listening to the coach, or he's arguing with teammates, that sort of thing. So at the moment, it all seems a little bit toxic in terms of how he fits, where he fits in the Washington rotation. So as I said, I mean, I'm not dropping him because we know what he can do. And like I said, prior to this, he had scored 26, 24, and 30 points in 3 consecutive games. He'd hit multiple threes in a couple of those. So there was there was some hope there, but then yesterday's game was just terrible. So I'm not sure what to think of it, but I think you just have to sit on him and hope for the best at this point. That was all the names I had. I did see the news pop up about Mark Cuban, who's made a hefty little profit on his investment. Reading it here, he bought the Mavericks for $285 million back in 2000, and he just sold majority stake for $3.5 billion. So pretty good return on his investment there.
I would say so, man. What a Maverick, right?
That's right. Yep. It's I can't even fathom that amount of money. Like, I was sitting on my lounge doing some work before, and I was thinking, because I was reading this, it came up on my phone, and I thought, I wonder what Mark Cuban's doing right now. I'm sure he's not sitting on his lounge doing a little bit of work. I'm sure he's, I don't know, he'd be flying somewhere or heading to a game, or it's just another world, another life. Any other fantasy things you want to touch on? Players, injuries, anything like that?
I think the biggest thing for me is make sure you pay attention to those in-season tournament results. Obviously, the Pacers and Lakers have clinched, but today is the last day of in-season tournament play, so we'll figure out who's in the knockout round next week. And for those teams that are going to make it, that's where you should direct your waiver wire ads for those guys that might play some extra games for you next week.
Yeah, and I'd have a look at next week. It's only, a couple of games. So just keep in mind that if you've got guys that have got injuries at the moment, it might be that teams are a little cautious with them over the next week or two, just because of the limited schedule, and they sort of get extended rest without actually missing too many games. So you might find that there's some players that are on the cusp of returning, someone like a Trey Murphy or like who's close, and they might go, well, look, we can actually give you another 1 game off or 2 games and you get a week or something like that. So just keep that in mind if you are looking at your roster and injuries, that there might be some instances of a little bit of additional rest. I'm going to let you go and do your thing there. I'm going to go and have some lunch. That will do it for today's show. Remember to check out all of our content over at FBIbasketball.com. Discord, I don't know what we've got in there now, 3,500, plenty of people in there. We had a pretty heated discussion about Josh Giddey last week, which I wasn't a part of. I came into it late, but there was certainly a lot of chatter going on about Josh Giddey. But jump in there. If you wanted to be part of our community, you can check us out on YouTube, of course, where we are, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe. It would be amazing. Until next time, catch up.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.